Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today we are joined by Dan Thompson of Saltwater Digital, a online digital marketing agency based out of Canada. Dan is a longtime player in the digital marketing space, the online space, the website building space. He has built a number of his own niche sites dating back to 10 plus years ago, run several Amazon FBA stores, sold those to an aggregator, and had his hands in a couple of other things as well. He's now running a digital marketing agency specializing in SEO, PPC, and a little bit of FBA as well. And so we get Dan on the podcast to talk to him about what it's like to grow an agency, some of the pitfalls he's had along the way, and some of the things he's done to succeed. He actually started off by white labeling his services to other larger, busier agencies, which is a really unique model and a great idea if you're looking to get an agency off the ground. So I pepper him with questions about what to consider, how to go about getting those white label clients, the things you need to be aware of, and the things that other agencies are looking for out of maybe a white label service. As his business grew, he transitioned away from white labeling and into providing those services on his own to clients. We talk about where he got those clients, which is mainly from Twitter. So we dive into Twitter marketing, how to grow an audience on Twitter, how to get leads coming through from Twitter, what's working, what's not, and where else he might put his time, LinkedIn, YouTube, even TikTok. We talk about those kinds of things. Towards the tail end of the conversation, we really get into the nitty gritty about what it looks like to succeed in an agency and what's important. We get into systems and we get to hear from Dan on some of the mistakes that he's made along the way as he's grown and maybe not had systems or not had the right systems in place. And we just talk a lot about what it looks like to specialize as an agency, how to pick what type of agency you want. And a lot of what he shares applies outside of the agency world to freelancers. And we even draw a lot of connections to websites. So if you're somebody who is building websites, there's going to be some interesting parallels with that. I finished by asking him, hey, what is working right now for you with your clients? You obviously have a good number of clients that you do monthly services for in the online marketing space. What's working? And so he shares what he sees working. And you know what? It's a lot simpler than you might think. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Dan Thompson with Saltwater Digital. Dan, welcome on board.
Appreciate you having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, very much so. I, as a fellow agency owner and manager, I always love when we get to talk with other agencies and people running agencies. You have a fun background. I love the way you've kind of broken down your journey that we're going to talk through today. But why don't you give us a little bit of background on maybe where you kind of got started in this whole world and bring us up to speed on where you're at now?
Perfect. Yeah. So I got started probably about 12 years ago, actually looking at, kind of reading through I think the initial site was a knife site that Spencer had built. And so that was kind of one of the first things that I'd ever sort of followed along with. And so that was a pretty integral part. And actually, I don't know if you go way back into the archives, I became actually pretty good friends with Perrin. Carol, who has worked with Spencer a long time ago as well, actually on the niche on his website. So so that's kind of how I got my start. I started with affiliate, and then I kind of transitioned a little bit into a little bit of client work. We kind of dabbled in that for a little while. Eventually, we ended up shifting gears for a few years to Amazon FBA. So we built and sold 2 Amazon FBA businesses, and then we've kind of come back around to building an agency again. So that's kind of where our journey has taken us.
So I'm taking notes here. You basically almost run the gamut here. I mean, outside of maybe starting a SaaS product, you've touched almost everything in digital marketing over the past decade or so.
I've touched quite a bit in digital marketing. Yeah, everything from PPC to SEO, building sites, as I said, affiliate marketing. I ran a website that was heavily built on through Instagram was where most of the traffic was coming from. So yeah, we've done a lot of things. We've done a lot of different things. And I guess the one thing I would say is a lot of it's kind of come back down to, even with FBA, like the thing that I find most interesting is that a lot of it comes back down to keyword research, understanding trends, understanding, how, different search volumes and different keywords are actually going to impact your business. And again, I think that's actually one of the areas that for FBA businesses gave us a pretty competitive advantage, just because so many of the sellers are basically relying on stat called BSR, which is bestseller rank, which is
Yep.
basically, it's how the velocity of a certain product on Amazon. And so if you take that data and look at it from also a keyword research perspective, just in terms of like Google search volume, you get a little bit of a clearer picture in terms of, and then if you take that one step further and look at the trend volume, you can really start to see things that like, oh, okay, this is interesting. This is starting to sell. This is how much it's selling. This is how much, volume there is. And this is sort of the trend of it. So yeah, a lot of it comes back down to keyword research and just kind of following trends.
Before we get into the details about the agency you've built, what you're seeing work, all that kind of stuff, I mean, I kind of am interested. You've touched all or so many different facets of, I'll say the buzzwords, right? Like as online marketers, as people listening to this podcast, we've all probably thought like, oh, should I start dabbling in Amazon FBA? Should I start dabbling in drop shipping? Or should I stick with one thing and just focus on getting really good at affiliate marketing or at content websites or et cetera? Like, what are your thoughts? Because you've dabbled a bunch, but you also seem to be fairly deep in specialization on each of these you've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, we spent, I'm trying to think. I think I spent 7 years growing FBA brands, kind of as an interlude there. And yeah, I would say, like you said, it's sort of a trap where you think that the next thing is going to be easier, or it's going to cash flow better, or it's going to work, whatever your reasoning is for sort of trying to figure out like which one of these avenues you want to pursue. I think the biggest thing is they all work. They all can be done well. They can all make you money, but it can be very tempting to kind of bounce around. But the real, I guess the real wins come when you kind of dive into something and become an actual expert into it. And you can sort of keep leveraging that skill kind of over and over again. I mean, that's what I've been doing for 12 years is basically leveraging SEO, leveraging understanding how search engines work. Again, whether that be Amazon or Google or any of the other social media platforms. And just kind of, as I said, I think that deep understanding comes from understanding how Google works. Because in my opinion, it's probably the most complex and probably the hardest one to figure out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. When did you leave a full-time job to pursue this world? How far ago was that?
Shoot, that's a good question. I would have been like 23, it's probably like 12 years ago, maybe.
Okay. So almost right out of the gate.
Yeah. I was pretty young when I first kind of got started. I remember my very first project I was doing with my dad actually when I was like 20, and I wanted to basically start a financial newsletter because my dad was an investor, and that was kind of our first and we just made all the mistakes. We spent like big money on like a website. We spent big money on a logo. We had no idea how we were going to market the content. And eventually we ended up pulling the thing up and being like, you know what, we'll just chalk it up to a learning experience. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started. I was still working at the time when we did that. And then I eventually got into niche sites. And as I said, my first one was at exercisefoamrollers.com, which I think is now defunct. But it made me $1,000 a month for a long time there. I got laid off and I was building that site at the same time. And so between my EI and that site, I had enough money to kind of make a go of it from there. That was kind of I got my lucky break, so to speak.
Yeah, that's bringing us back to the days of the true niche sites where you just had a domain about a specific product and ranked it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was very niche and it got hit very hard. That's for sure. I remember, I think I sold it. That one I did sell, but it definitely got cratered, probably a year or two later. And it's like, oh. So
you feel good, you feel bad. You feel good that you sold it and actually were able to profit. You still feel a little bad though.
You do, especially, I didn't know any better then. Those were early days. I never.
Well, no one did. There wasn't prerogative or precedent for a lot of the things that there is now.
Totally. Absolutely. So I think, and I mean, and if it was, I guess if there's any karma, we had our affiliate market, our affiliate portfolio get crushed when we still owned it. So we had built up a pretty good size portfolio and we were using some shady tactics. We were doing a lot of PBN and Web 2.0 building, link building and things of that nature, which again, still actually do work. But again, you learn that, okay, it's probably going to get crushed at some point.
Right.
And, you see if you can live with those risks, then by all means, right?
We could nerd out on that for so long.
Yeah.
What caused you to leave all of this behind, all that we've talked about, and focus on an agency on Saltwater Digital?
I got burnt out with Amazon. I found that model, that business model, we talked about this in terms of, the next one being, a better business model, whatever it is. Business model was way more stressful. You're carrying hundreds, if not millions of dollars worth of inventory. You're fully reliant on Amazon. I think in many ways that if you have a site, for instance, and its only traffic source is Google, like it's nerve-wracking. That's kind of what we had. We basically had one site and its only source of income was Amazon. And Amazon, when they decide that it's time to sort of drop the hammer, I can find that they're oftentimes more punitive and than even Google, which I think maybe some listeners might find surprising, who have been through an algorithm update or have been through, a situation where their sites have been, demolished by an update. So this was my business partner had been running our agency kind of throughout me running these FBA brands. And then I guess it would have been, we sold December 2020. So December 31st, 2020, we sold our second Amazon FBA brand, sold it to one of these aggregator companies. We still own a portion of it. And then I ran that for another 12 months. And then after that, so basically the start of this year was when we really kind of started looking to grow the agency more aggressively, going kind of from, a one-person agency, not one person, that's not fair. My business partner leading and running the agency to just me coming on board and also helping out sort of in a leadership capacity.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that's worth kind of doubling down on. Most of the time when an algorithm update happens, you're losing, if you lose rankings, it's not because Google actually called your site out and gave you, say, a manual action. You usually are losing rankings because of the way that they changed search intent, the way they changed how they felt about your site. And recovery is totally possible. We have podcasts that we've just done on how to recover from a Google update. But when Amazon comes along as a seller, and I know this from having worked with several of them and helping them out from an agency standpoint, they can just suspend your entire account and there's no recovery from that.
Yeah, I think they're generally pretty fair. I think most of these large platforms actually tend to be pretty fair. There are instances where people have been treated unfairly. You certainly do get in a situation where you can be sort of a victim of a larger corporation, I guess, and not having any kind of, the human element of it. But yeah, there's definitely been instances, not us personally. We've never had any severe actions taken against us. I shouldn't say that. We have had severe actions, but nothing like a account-wide suspension. But yeah, you definitely hear about that. And again, it's not like you're losing just your niche site, or, it's not like it would, I guess the equivalent would literally be if your domain just, was gone.
Yeah, you can't even market it on other platforms or social media or email or those kinds of things.
Exactly. And part of the problem is you get stuck with huge amounts of inventory, right? Because that's kind of the crux or the problem with that particular business model is it's very inventory intensive. Running out of stock is no bueno on Amazon. You can't do it. And so you're trying to basically constantly make sure you have enough stock and things like that. So when you do have these issues that come up, if it's a product issue, whatever it is, it can cost huge sums of dollars.
You've convinced me. Agency life sounds good. That a bit tongue in cheek myself. Let's talk about early days of the agency. I mean, I'm really curious to hear, having, gone over with you a couple of things prior to the call. I'm definitely fascinated by some of the approaches that you took early on. Share with us the ways that you grew the agency out of the gate, and we can dive into it.
Yeah. So again, most of the credit goes to my business partner for sort of the initial growth. As I mentioned, we were kind of running not opposite directions, but I was working on the FBA side of things. He was working a lot more on the agency. There would be some crossover there, of course. But so I would say that early days, a lot of it was just, personal network. A lot of was, referrals, friends, family, things like that. BNI, so he's still part of BNI, but that was always for those, I guess, listening who aren't familiar with BNI. It's the business networking. I don't know what the I stands for.
I don't either. I was hoping you would, because I don't know either.
Yeah, it's business networking, something institution maybe. Anyways, it's a worldwide platform that basically you go and you meet once a week, and it's the same. I think it's probably 40 business owners locally, whatever it might be, and you bring guests and so on and so forth. And, the idea is to basically help each other build each other's business. So there'll be an electrician, there'll be a plumber, there'll be a marketing guy, there might be a website guy, et cetera. So yeah, we got a lot of leads from that, a lot of our early clients from that. And then I think what really ended up kind of kicking it from sort of a side project to more of a full-time thing would have been once we got hooked in with a couple of larger agencies. And so our office is actually in the office of another agency. And so that really helped. So we were we were skilled operators in terms of, running PPC, running SEO campaigns. And so they still do to this day, especially the PPC side of things, they rely heavily on us for their client work. And so they're charging a lot more than we do. So, that kind of gap is basically, or that arbitrage is where you can basically come in and serve a need, because they don't necessarily have, hiring, when you're running an agency, as I'm sure hiring somebody is a huge decision. So oftentimes to kind of, fill that gap, you might be willing to pay a little bit more for, to white label someone else's service until maybe you're at a certain point where it's like, okay, I got enough work for this person, or I'm getting, maybe I'm 75% of the way, or whatever it might be. Right. And so that was a big win for us, was kind of finding those initial partners. We found, as I said, a couple locally, just networking. As I mentioned, my business partner to get a lot of credit for that. Found a couple on Upwork, actually. So that was another, again, I think people underestimate how good that platform is. I would say that, we didn't use it extensively just because we found other channels eventually that we thought were a little bit less work, that were maybe more scalable. But I certainly have talked to, we got the strategy originally from a girl who runs a social media company. And she was, pulling in, she was doing 30K a month, basically as a solo founder, almost no overhead. And all of her work was Upwork. And it was, there was really good clients. Like she was, her clients were paying her $1,000, $1,500 a month to manage social media platforms. And, she had 20 or 30 of them, was offshoring a lot of it or outsourcing a lot of it. And was making a really good living. So like, oh, that's interesting. So did that for a while. As I said, we got a couple of partners through that as well, through Upwork. So I would say was kind of our initial sort of genesis in terms of how we went from, making no money to making, $20,000, $25,000 a month.
I think it's such an interesting approach. And maybe sitting here at this seat and interviewing so many different people, we talk a lot or hear a lot about obviously starting your own side project and starting to enter the world of online marketing by doing. Yep. And then we also talk a lot about, hey, maybe for you, a better approach, not you personally, but you as a listener, someone listening to the show, maybe a better approach is to actually go work for an agency or to go work in a SEO or digital marketing role to learn. In some ways, you're kind of in the middle there with this approach. What kind of tips would you have for someone who's listening who might be thinking, hey, this white labeling approach might be the perfect way for me to get out of what I'm doing and into online marketing? What tips could you maybe share with someone so they could maybe identify if that's the right call for them, and then how they could go about getting their first few white label clients?
Yeah, no. And I love actually what you brought up there, because I think it's often, not looked down upon, but I think it's often,
stigmatized a bit.
Yeah, in terms of both the white label and also the concept that you mentioned, working for a larger agency. One thing that I wish that I had done, again, I think I learned more from affiliate marketing. I think affiliate marketing was the best education you can give yourself in terms of SEO, and even PPC if you can make that work. That's a tough nut to crack. But I think in terms of like an education from actual SEO skills, working as an affiliate marketer was great. I think one thing that I definitely we lacked when we first got into this business was, if I had gone and worked for a more professional agency out of the gate, I think I would have learned a ton, not necessarily about SEO, but specifically, but about running my own business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that, that took a lot of time for us to start to figure out in terms of, pricing properly. Because that's, understanding, trying to understand how to provide value while also making sure you're making your margins, things like that, how to sell. There's definitely a lot of lessons that I could have learned and could have fast tracked if I'd spent a year or two kind of working at an SEO agency in any capacity. But as far as the white labeling, sorry, that was a bit of a tangent there.
No, yeah.
As far as the white labeling goes, it's kind of funny that we're having this conversation today. I had a guy reach out to me on Twitter today, and he basically said, "Hey, Dan, Dan, I noticed that we had some interactions just, through normal discourse on Twitter. He DM'd me, basically said, hey, Dan, I noticed we're in the same industry. I provide these 4 services. If you're at a capacity or you have some overflow, I would love to take it off your hands. And I was like, great. Like, what are your rates? He sent me his rates over. He said, I normally charge $80 an hour. I got that discounted. I discount that to, I think it was 35%, like $55 an hour. And I said, yeah, send me your price book. Send me, some more information, because there's definitely a world where I could see needing help. And that's basically all we did when we were trying to provide that sort of service for the client, or sorry, not for the client, for the agencies that we worked with, right? Is just trying to basically provide help at a reasonable rate. And again, it doesn't have to be cheap. Like I said, he's basically offering me $55 an hour. He's a freelancer. That's probably pretty good money for him. And he's just white labeling, so I might white label some work to him if the need arises, right? And so I think, yeah, DMs. I think Twitter's probably like, we get most of our business off Twitter now, so I'm very gung ho on Twitter. LinkedIn, same thing. Cold outreach. Networking locally. If again, BNIs, things like that, where you can go meet agency owners. I think it's pretty common. I think there's a lot of agencies who are at capacity or near capacity that would love to have someone competent come in and say, hey, I can help you out. Here's my rate. I still get to make my margin, or it's a little bit less, but it ends up being pretty good if you start thinking about, okay, you're paying, employees say $35 or $37 an hour, whatever it is, $30 an hour. A freelancer comes in and you're paying them 50, that gap is actually made up, and because you don't have someone that's full time, you don't have someone on payroll, et cetera. So, but yeah, I think honestly, if I was going to start doing it again, I would go probably the Twitter route and do just DM agency owners, find them, connect with them, try to add some value, and then reach out and just let them know, like, hey, this is who I am, this is who I offer. I'll send you my price book. If you ever need, some help, I'd love to kind of jam out on it.
You've talked about the ideas around creating content as well. As it relates to your agency, where do you think that adds value as an agency, and even maybe as a freelancer, if that applies as well?
Yeah, I mean, on the right platform, it adds a ton of value. As I said, we've basically, our business has grown from 25 to, I think we're going to do about 45K this month, in a really short period of time. And that's basically been getting on Twitter, connecting with small business owners, and adding value to them by explaining, how I would go about building out their SEO campaigns. People want to understand what they want to understand what they're being sold, but they don't necessarily want to go do the work themselves. Business owners who are making $1 million a year in revenue, which again sounds like maybe a large number to a lot of people, but the reality is there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of businesses in every city doing at least $1 million a year in revenue. They don't have time to do their online marketing. They don't have time to run their PPC. They don't have time to do their own SEO. They don't want to build their own website, but they want to understand, I think part of this is they want to understand what it is that I'm providing. And I think through just creating content and showing kind of, hey, here's what I'm going to do from an SEO perspective. Here's how I approach, PPC. Here's some of the web builds that we built. This is why we built them this way. This is why it's important for the SEO. I think that's provided a lot of value, and it builds a ton of trust. Like you get on these calls with people, and they feel like they already know you, which is like the biggest advantage. And I think that's like, it's really, really strange phenomenon that kind of happens when you're sort of engaging and talking to people on Twitter. Is like they feel like you literally feel like you know that person already. And again, that just goes so far in terms of helping you sell your product and service, et cetera. So from like that perspective, yeah, obviously we create content for that reason. If you're building an affiliate site, obviously creating the content is the lifeblood of the business. So. I wish I'd started sooner creating more content that I was excited about. And for me, SEO excites me. I wish I'd started sooner, basically, whether it be Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever. Even this podcast, right? It's another example of content creation.
You've talked heavily about Twitter, which I want to ask you a few things about maybe in the future here, but are there any other platforms that you're seeing really work well to connect with potential clients? Twitter has that connection environment. I'm struggling to see it as clearly on YouTube or these other platforms, but what are you seeing from your vantage point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember what his name is. There's an agency owner who's got a fairly large presence on YouTube as well. I know I had a chat with him, and he was explaining to me like that was basically his where he was generating most of his leads from. I think a lot of people will be surprised that actually LinkedIn is starting to become like Twitter, in that the format's a little bit different. If you're kind of curious about this, and again, there's a guy named Justin Welsh. He's on Twitter and LinkedIn, but if you're curious about it, go check him out on both those platforms. He talks about basically creating on LinkedIn, and to me, it was surprising because LinkedIn is, I think most people assume it with associate LinkedIn with updates from, their high school friends. They just got a job promotion or whatever, right? And
congratulate so-and-so on 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Like that's like that like those, or like someone's like, or you're getting spammed in like your DMs on LinkedIn. That's how people associate it. So there's such a black hole for good content on that platform that when people actually start posting and publishing regularly, it's the same thing with Twitter, where it's just basically like the follower count will just balloon. Like it happens very quickly.
Reminds me of the old days of Facebook and even Instagram.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I guess there is there's always that fear that they're going to take sort of your audience away from you. But I think Twitter, just given sort of the nature of it and its longevity, I'm sure it'll continue to change and evolve. But I feel more comfortable in that than I did, say, when I was building an Instagram, a men's fashion Instagram account. And, again, that the reach can just kind of, implode essentially, right? Which is always the big concern about these social platforms.
How about TikTok?
I haven't gone on TikTok myself. I don't know about you. I haven't downloaded it just because I just can't do that to myself. I don't think it's so addictive. Like, I don't know if you've spent any time exploring TikTok.
I haven't, to be fair. I just know that I'm on YouTube a decent amount, both for client work and for personal, and they've mimicked a lot of what TikTok does with their shorts. So I kind of understand the nature now of TikTok a lot more clearly just from interacting there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say like one of the stories I always like telling is, so our brand, again, not a perfect space for TikTok. So we basically our second FBA brand was selling supplements. And we had someone post organically about our product. And it happened quite a bit where people would buy this product and they'd post about it, whatever. That's just kind of how the nature of the beast works. But we had one of these videos go viral, and we went from selling, 40 units a day of this product to 400 a day. And that spike lasted about 10 days. It was like, and I was like, oh, okay, like, I get this now. Like this, and we've, because we sold to another a larger company who owns a bunch of brands. I've talked to some other brand owners who've experienced the exact same thing. And, so if you can mimic that or sort of recreate that magic, it's sort of like, so Amazon, it's basically like they love outside traffic, right? Like it's sort of the holy grail for them. And so when they start seeing tons and tons of sales converting from another platform, whether it be Google or TikTok or whatever, your rankings spike, like they go crazy. It's basically the equivalent of really, really good on-page metrics, I guess, or, really good UX experience where people are taking a ton of actions and they're not bouncing, et cetera, right? It's an indication to Amazon that, hey, this page deserves to rank higher because it's converting so well. And so anytime you can kind of do that, and again, just talking to other e-commerce brand owners in the D2C space, like same thing, like right now, TikTok is where they are all basically living and performing, or marketing, because it's so powerful right now.
Oh, we should do an episode on TikTok with someone. I got to find an expert on TikTok here.
Yeah, I would listen to that for sure.
I would too.
Yeah.
So we talked about your initial work with basically white labeling as a service to get your agency off the ground. And I know I'm kind of rounding the edges there by saying that. And then from what I've heard you talk about, you kind of got to this point. And then of late, you've grown quite a bit. You mentioned 25K to 45K a month. Is that still in the back of white labeling? Have you transitioned your agency since then? And if so, what's the transition look like, and how are you getting clients nowadays? You did mention Twitter, but I'm wondering when that transition might have happened.
Yeah. So I did a, I did a cohort course. I'm not sure if you've kind of come across cohort courses, but they're
Mm-mm.
basically, the concept is like, they're essentially courses that you're sort of doing live with other people, and there's just a lot more connection and community to them. I've been in some that have been pretty good. Like I've done a couple. One was really good. One was okay. One was so-so. This one was really good. It's called Ship 30, which it's basically a writing course. And so it's a 30-day writing challenge that you're basically getting in there and you're writing every day, and you're posting on Twitter. That's like that's the whole thing. And so that's kind of when I first started to realize, like, I was like, oh, interesting. I have no followers, but I'm starting to get people inbounding me about, SEO services. This is really interesting. And so that was probably, I guess, towards the end of last year, somewhere, I think it was probably October of last year. I was still working full time at basically running our brand that we had sold, and
Mm-hmm.
so I couldn't really devote as much time as I wanted to. But that's when it kind of clicked for me. And so since then, I've probably been on 2 or 3 sort of sprints where I've been super engaged and super active on Twitter. And again, like, just for context, like, I don't have a huge audience. I have 1,900 followers, but 60% plus of our inbound and new business is from Twitter. And I would say it's probably booking, 15 to 18 leads a month consistently, like good leads, businesses in sort of our sweet spot of $1 to $3 million a year, who have a marketing budget, who want a new website. A lot of business owners who have bought businesses, and now they've bought a business, they've got a small business, and now they're trying to basically grow it. And oftentimes that involves digital marketing, because that's one of the avenues that a lot of small business owners, sort of outside of the online world, like, don't really do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I honestly, I can't undersell how powerful it's been for growing our agency. And I'm not even doing everything right, because I know this because I've talked to other guys, whether it's email marketing or, copywriting or whatever, and they're on Twitter, they're, growing their own agencies, and they're blowing past me. Like, I'm not doing it, nearly as well as I could be doing it. So, and as I said, LinkedIn, I know is how you can have a similar effect. So it's I feel like if I wanted to, or if I needed to, I should say, if I had enough time, I suppose, we could accelerate this growth just through this platform.
Give us some of the 80/20 on on what's working with Twitter. I know threads are a big thing right now. We're
Yeah,
recording here in the summer of 2022. Who knows? That could change. We
yeah,
talked
totally.
about the fickleness of social media platforms. Although I do agree. I think something about Twitter has a little bit more of a long-standing pattern. But anyways, we'll save theory aside. What's
Yeah.
working on Twitter? Like, maybe just some high-level stuff that you've seen working as you've put your time and effort towards it, whether in sprints or whether consistently.
Yeah. So you mentioned threads. If you're on Twitter, you'll notice there's a lot of, the email marketing guy for D2C brands, or whatever, right? So just like really being like specific and niche. I like talking about too many topics to really sort of pigeonhole. That's one of those things I think I could do better. If I was just like the SEO guy for small businesses, I think I would do better on it. Um, and again, I kind of follow the sort of like the 60 or 70-30 rule, 60-40, 70-30, of where 60 to 70% of my content is going to be SEO focused. It's going to be, and specifically, I try to make it so that it's relevant for small businesses. So again, there's actually quite a few niche site builders on Twitter as well, with fairly substantial audiences. And so, whatever you're talking about, it's like, if you just got to dial into sort of that one thing and spend most of your time. And it can feel repetitive, because you say the same things. You're like, okay, like, because part of the strategy, you basically pull things that you said 90 days ago that worked, and you basically rewrite it and say it again, because now you have new followers, new people will see it, et cetera. So I'd say that's a big one. Another one is obviously just making connections. I kind of have, they call them engagement groups. It's a derogatory term almost, but I probably have 6 or 7 guys that will like almost everything that I say, and vice versa. We're all in different spaces. We're all doing different things. But those are honest friendships, and that have grown. I've had tons and tons of calls with these guys. I've built websites for them. They've helped me with my business. We're in masterminds together, whatever it is. So we're fairly connected. And while yes, it's not friend in the sense of yeah, I can go have a beer with him because he lives in the other, a different country than me. It is something that there is sort of a level of connectedness there. And again, just basically helping each other grow your accounts in a sort of what I would consider a non spammy way, just naturally engaging. I'm not going to engage with 100% of everything these guys say, but anything I kind of agree with, I'll take the time to engage with it. That's a big part of it. And then again, I think if you were doing it really effectively, you'd be DMing a lot more. I don't do a ton of DMing. I should. Guides. Anytime I put out here's my playbook. I think on like for instance, one of the things I put out was my playbook. Like here's my SMB marketing and tech stack. And so I have a Notion doc. That was a part of a thread. Basically got people to engage with the thread in order to receive the Notion doc. So it's kind of a pretty standard sort of, lead magnet, if you will. But on Twitter, that worked really well and has continued to work well. So yeah, I mean, it's honestly not rocket science. As I said, honestly, if you're looking to learn about this kind of thing, if you're thinking like, oh, okay, maybe this is what I want to kind of try to, build a business around. Because again, it's not just agencies or services that you can build a business around Twitter. There's people selling courses. There's there's real estate guys. There's everybody's on there. And if you're kind of trying to build a business around that, I would recommend following Justin Welsh because he's doing a good job of kind of teaching about kind of growing on Twitter, growing on LinkedIn, et cetera.
That's a lot of lead generation that you're getting from Twitter. That's really, I mean, for someone, I would expect to hear that maybe if you had 19,000 followers but yeah. Just hearing the number of followers you have and the fact that you're saying like, hey, I'm not all that consistent. I'll go in spurts. I'm there, but I'm not doing everything right. To generate that many leads somewhat consistently a month is really compelling and impressive.
If someone had told me that before I'd started, I probably wouldn't have believed them because it's such, like I said, the ratio between leads. And again, it's been pretty consistent. This isn't like over a month or two, this is 6 months now. And, if we wanted to, just like other platforms, we could boost those posts. We could start putting some ad dollars into them as well. But if I go on, Twitter tomorrow and basically say like, we have capacity for web builds, I'll probably get 1 or 2 people to DM me like, that day. And I'll have a few more clients to basically start doing web builds for. And then of course, case studies. That's the other thing I didn't talk about is case studies in specific niches. There's like, I have, I'm working on one for an optometrist basically where we did a really good job for them. And I got to finish it. I got to finish writing the thing so I can get it like turned into a thread and then I can kind of turn it into a lead magnet. But that's kind of what I mean. Like I'm just not doing it as like consistently and as well as maybe I could be doing it. So yeah, I really like, it's really blown my mind though. Like the quality of leads and the number of leads has been remarkable. And as I said, it's not just, it's literally any type of service business that's online is definitely viable. And it's even wider than that. So yeah.
Well, congratulations. Good job there. I think it's easy to say you've done very well for yourself on Twitter. Whether you could be putting more time and effort into it, whether you could be doing more of the tactics you talked about, like DMing or those sorts of things, it's clearly working for you as it is. So that's really compelling to hear about. Maybe if we could, because this is an area that trips a lot of people up, whether they're freelancing, whether they're white labeling, I'll now include in the conversation. I need to start including that. Whether they're freelancing, white labeling, running their own agency, it's scale and how to handle scale. It's one thing to be able to take on a couple clients. It's something to be able to do that consistently and produce great results at scale. Now, if you're on a track record or on a trajectory of $45,000 a month, you have scale there. How are you handling that? What tips do you have for people who grow past 1, 2, 3 clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first sort of part of that answer is like, first you got to really figure out like, is that something you want? I think this is a conversation that me and my business partner are having, like there's different levels in terms of, and at what point is, enough. And I don't know. I think it's sort of, that's more of, I guess, a larger kind of thought question. But that's kind of the first thing to understand is like, just because you're growing at scale doesn't mean you're making more money. Like, you're going to get to a point where it's actually, you're going to make more money with 2 or 3 clients than you are with 10 with an employee or 2. Right. And and you're also going to have a lot more headaches oftentimes. So I think
Yeah.
that's one of the first thing is like you can make really good money with 3, 4 clients that you're servicing yourself. And I think that I think a lot of people think that they have to go and scale a business because that's what they think they should do,
Hmm.
when maybe that's not actually who they are, or what they want to fundamentally want. So that's kind of my first part about that. And the second part, as I said, when we talked about earlier, I was saying one of the things I wish I'd done, or not wish I'd done, but one thing that I think I missed out on is working for a really, professional agency. And, kind of talking to some of these other business owners who are doing 2, 3, $4 million a year, I quickly realized like, oh, my systems are no good.
Yeah.
they're gonna break. And they have broken. And now okay, great. Now we've kind of we're starting to backtrack a little bit and figure out, okay, if we want to kind of get to the next level, what systems do we need in place? For instance, like something as simple as onboarding, right? Like we didn't have an onboarding system a month ago, right? That was just like through email. Send me your login for your domains, whatever, right? Like it's or send me your WordPress login, whatever it might be. Where's your domain registered? Like things like that, right? So we just like building up set forms now. It's like, okay, so we have set forms. And so the next step for us is basically having either Zapier, or probably before that, it'll probably be an assistant just basically taking all that data and then putting it into a Notion database. And now how's that Notion database set up? Are you organized? Because that's what it comes down to, is if you're not organized, you can't manage. You're gonna hit a cap really, really quickly if you're not organized. If you want to manage, again, PPC and SEO, they kind of, I said our PPC contracts. I think with PPC you can manage more clients, whereas with SEO, at least for us in terms of small businesses, like you can manage more small business clients than you can with SEO. So, and that's reflected in the price. But, at SEO, it's like once we kind of got to 10, 15 clients, it was starting to look like, it was like, okay, like things are starting to break down a little bit here. So let's start putting some systems and processes in place. And again, this is something that I'm working on, and I talk about a lot, actually, quite transparently on Twitter, is basically like, my systems aren't great and I'm trying to improve them. Like that's something I'm very, mindful of every single month, just trying to get better at building better systems that allow us to kind of go faster and provide clients with better experiences. As an agency owner, that half the battle is just that communication, right?
Yeah.
And that's mostly just organization and systems and understanding, having, things like deadlines and who's responsible for what, et cetera. So
You kind of touched on making that decision at the outset about how big you really want to go. It reminds me, it's strikingly similar to me as that question maybe a website owner goes through, which is once you have a little bit of success with one website, do you double down or keep going on that website, or do you start another one?
yeah.
And what I tell people, not that I own a ton of websites, but having a lot of clients on the agency side of things, it feels so similar to me. And it's like, it's a totally different ballgame. It doesn't mean it's harder or easier, but it's just different having one website versus having a portfolio of websites. You're doing totally different things with your day. You're making totally different decisions. And it doesn't mean you're going to be more profitable. It doesn't mean you're going to be more successful. And it sounds so similar to what you were describing with more clients as an agency versus maybe being a freelancer.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think it's actually, it sort of, when you're talking about that in terms of building a portfolio of websites versus just one, like, I think, again, as you mentioned, I think it can be kind of exciting to start a new site and start building on a new site. But honestly, like a lot of times it's like, you can just do better with one if you just build that one site and you just continue to, hammer on that one site, assuming the topic's broad enough, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, I remember when we were kind of going from 1 or 2 sites to trying to build out sort of a portfolio sites. And honestly, like we had some wins, but we had a lot of losses too. We had a lot of sites that did not work out because we were trying to build 12 of them at a time. And everything suffers because it's, you're no longer the one writing the content. You're no longer the one doing the SEO. You're no longer the one doing outreach for, link building, whatever it might be. Like those things all suffer when you're trying to have somebody else do them that, maybe you haven't fully thought through or figured out how to train that person properly so that they're doing at least, 90% of a job as effectively as you were before.
Yeah, we had Ewan Finzer on a couple of months ago, probably now, and he's building, I think he has a team of building hundreds of sites. But when you talk to him about his day-to-day, it's, it seems more like big data management and people management and system,
Yeah.
I don't don't want to speak for him, but I don't think he's writing too many articles or, necessarily doing a ton of the keyword research himself,
Yeah.
right? It's just a different ballgame at that point.
Totally.
So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, that gets whether it's agency or affiliate, that's kind of the question, and the big question you got to answer is like, do you actually enjoy running people, like, managing people, looking through data, tracking KPIs? Because these are all things I got to start taking a little bit more seriously. Like if you want to kind of grow, like it's one thing to grow, but to grow and remain profitable is the challenge, I think, for most businesses. It's sort of like you figure out your lead gen and it's like, okay, make sure you're charging enough. Okay, now are you doing this profitably? Are you making sure, is your team running efficiently? And you're not, like you said, I'm not running a lot of SEO campaigns anymore. I'm overseeing them, but I'm not running the day-to-day of them anymore. And so it's, and so it's like, if you like SEO, you probably don't necessarily want to build a big agency, because that's not what it is. It's managing people, right? So,
Yep.
yeah.
Well, without putting you in the spot, because I think it makes sense to hear, systems and scales hard and all that kind of stuff. But maybe for someone who hasn't tried it, what are some mistakes maybe, or some things that have broken that you're comfortable sharing, just to give people like a mental image of how important it is when they hear an actual example?
Yeah. So what are some things that have broken? From the agency side of things, I would say one of the things that's been the hardest, again, I wouldn't say it's never necessarily broken, but is the content creation. Because part of every single SEO package that we have is content creation, whether that's building service pages or location pages or more content, just like, for trying to target other keywords that are relevant to that business, or even just kind of trying to build up the relevance of that site. Content creation, I think, is one of those things that's really hard to scale and scale well, because I find, for me personally, like, I wouldn't say I'm not an excellent writer, but I think I'm probably above average writer. And so trying to outsource that has always been challenging. We've gotten in situations where, a piece of content goes to a client, it gets published, and the client's pissed. And that, I would say, that's probably the one thing that we're trying to fix constantly, is just making sure that the quality of content is really high, and that, because again, like, these are businesses and their names are attached to it, right? So the client I'm referencing specifically was a chiropractor, didn't like what we had written. Maybe it wasn't, maybe the facts weren't checked properly or whatever it might have been. He wants to make sure whatever he's publishing on his website is factually correct, because obviously it's medical advice essentially, right? And so we've definitely run into a few problems there, where you're now going and you're trying to smooth over a client who's pretty upset because he's, basically feels like he's being misrepresented online, and that's our responsibility. And so that's definitely one of it. And then, as I said, I think we're starting to see, even just getting quotes out on time is getting more challenging as we're having more calls. Understanding that, look, like, you have to space things out properly in terms of like, I guess, setting expectations. If I used to be that I'd say, okay, I'd hop off a call, that'd be it. I'd go and do the quote, I'd send it out. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. I don't have time. Oftentimes I have 2 or 3 more meetings stacked up behind it, right? And so we're trying to train our employees to basically be able to send out some of those quotes for us, to do some of the strategic work, which is really challenging. So I would say that that's something that's broken. I think that on the Amazon side, we had a period where we launched a lot of products and we had a lot of busts. And that was just a lack of proper keyword research, basically not launching properly. Again, that was also a problem of scale, where we were trying to go from launching 1 product every 3 months to launching 6 products in 3 months. And so you get a lot more misses. So yeah, I would say there's a lot of things. I think everything just tends to get a little bit harder and tends to break a little bit once you kind of grow past that next plateau.
Man, yeah. But again, that stuff applies whether you're doing an agency, whether you're doing a website. Everything's the same. You try to go from writing 5 articles a month on your website to 25. You try to, it's the same stuff that happens.
Right?
And then you look back at an article and you're like, what? That's not accurate.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what happened. I looked at this article and I had skim proofread it, because I was like, I know this client, and then he basically goes in and he ripped it apart, and I was so embarrassed. It was just like, and I read it and I was like, that was not good. And actually, now that I'm talking about this, we had a situation where we had one of our writers was she was in Canada. But she was effectively outsourcing it.
Yep.
And I didn't find that out until much, much later. And then I went back and started reading her articles. I'm like, oh my goodness, this isn't written by someone this is not written by an English speaker. This was written by someone in the Philippines. And again, nothing wrong with that. Like, but as far as what we were providing for our clients, that's what we were saying. Like, US and Canadian based writers, like that's who's writing your content. And so, you kind of breach that trust a little bit. And so that was a pretty painful experience, just basically having to have that conversation of like, we let her go. It was just like, it's sort of like, she denied it and it was a whole thing, but it was pretty obvious that if that was what she was writing, the quality had just gone to basically zero. So that was definitely something that we learned the hard way.
That's tough. That's tough. I can say we've probably all been there in some capacity.
Yeah.
Or will be there if we haven't gotten there yet. It's going to happen to all of us.
Totally. Yeah, exactly. It's easier than ever, right? Like we have staff in office, but it's easier than ever to take it, if you're hiring remotely, for them to hire somebody remotely and, basically not do the work, right? Which is like, again, I guess it's fine if you don't notice. I don't know what the ethical sort of gray line there is, but
I remember, this is going to date both of us probably, but I remember in the 4-Hour Work Week, he basically spent an entire chapter talking about how to not do your job, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
That was where the concept first came to me. I was like, oh, you could kind of outsource your job, I suppose, but I'm not sure about that.
Totally. And then you figure out pretty quickly if you're outsourcing your job and like there's no quality control, it turns pretty bad pretty quickly. So yeah. So
talk about how important you think it is to specialize as an agency or a freelancer. And then if you do see importance in it, what types of considerations you think are valid in terms of a focus?
Interesting. So when you say specialized, do you mean like niche down as in like, I do SEO for dentists?
I heard you say I work with small businesses in the $1 to $3 million range. I also heard you earlier reference someone who is the PPC guy for the, so I've heard these threads throughout. And I just kind of want to pull on it a bit and see if that's something that you focus on or something that you actually don't think is that important, even though you do see it happening around you.
I would say very important. That's my first thing is yes, I do think it's important.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I'm preaching, but I'm not practicing because we have clients in a wide range of industries. And I think one thing that we do really well is because of that, because of the amount of, we've done, like I said, we've done everything from building our own e-commerce sites to building, our own affiliate sites to running clients in a ton of different industries. I think that sort of breadth of marketing has given us a bit of a unique perspective. But in terms of like growing a business, if I was like, okay, if I was going to restart tomorrow and my only concern was how fast, can I grow an SEO agency? Yeah, I would definitely niche way down. Because what ends up happening is you first of all, you start ranking for these things. There's, maybe I'll send it to you after. And if there's show notes, you can include it. There's a guy that I follow on Twitter. His name, Tim Stodzy, I think his name is. And he basically does SEO for healthcare facilities. So like, addiction, rehab, that type of thing. Super bright guy, super bright guy. Anyways, and that's, when you go search healthcare SEO, like he comes up and he talks about it in some of his videos where, because he's niched down so far, just like a website, right? Like a website where it's like, if all you're writing about is like dog frisbees, like you're probably going to be able to rank about rank dog frisbees to some extent. Right. And so I think there's that perspective of like, it makes it easier to rank. It makes it easier to manage clients because now you can really systematize that process because every single client looks exactly the same. And then you also get a ton of case studies. The number of people that have come to me and said, oh, I read your case study about, self-storage SEO. I'd like to work with you. It's, and that's why we write case studies and put them out there so that people will see them in similar industries and go, oh, perfect. This guy obviously knows what he's doing. Look what he did for this, storage facility, a couple hundred miles from me or whatever. Right. So I think there's huge merit in doing that. And then even if you're on Twitter, same thing, you can just be talking specifically to, business owners of that space. And people probably think, well, that's too small, but it's like, it's not. There's so many clients out there and there's so much opportunity out there. And so I would say that that's definitely a very prudent decision if you're kind of building an agency and you're just like, let's just focus on getting these types of clients.
It's great. I couldn't agree more. It's great advice. And oftentimes when you're just starting, it's so difficult to want to isolate yourself into a certain category. But like you said, I think that the well is a lot deeper typically than most people will give credit for, or at least deem worthy.
Totally. And like you said, I think people think that they're minimizing their opportunity by niching. And that's how it feels, because I know, because I've resisted that for so many years. And we're just starting to kind of get into a little bit more now where I'm like, okay, like, let's see what we've done like really, really well in the last, over the 6 or 7 years that we've run this agency. Let's see what's really worked for us. And let's double down on that. And let's really start promoting ourselves as, service providers for that industry. And that is one benefit of going wide first, is you can go, okay, you know what, I got tremendous results in this space, in this space, in this space. And I know how to get those results, even if it's in, Tulsa, Oklahoma versus, Austin, Texas. Like it's going to be similar enough. And so you just know how to get the results that you're trying to get after. So I think there's that benefit of going wide initially, but yeah, definitely kind of niching down over time definitely makes sense.
Oh, very good. We touched on a whole lot of stuff. I love how wide ranging your experience levels have been and are. I mean, we've had agency owners on before, and it's always a really stimulating conversation to hear what's working now and what's not. But you've certainly been in in all the different fields, like we talked about at the outset. I have one final question for you before we close up. It's super broad in nature.
Okay.
Right now, you're at an agency. You're doing SEO, PPC, that sort of thing. What's working nowadays? Like, what are you seeing move the needle, maybe across numerous clients, numerous websites that an individual wouldn't see? What kind of things are working right now and that you're focusing on at your agency?
Yeah. Okay. I think I have a pretty good answer for this, hopefully. So, our playbook right now is, we basically, and I think it's been, this playbook's worked for forever in terms of for small businesses. And I think it actually translates really well to basically any business, whether it's an affiliate business or whatever it might be. We stand up a lot of location pages and a lot of service pages. So that's kind of number one, is like, I want to know every single service you provide. So if you're a plumber, like, I don't want to know that you're a plumber. I want to know you fix water heaters, you take care of, burst pipes, you trench sewers, you do trenchless sewer work, whatever it might be. Like, I want the full spectrum. So that's like the first thing, so that I can build pages out with unique content on every single one of those topics. Then I want to know exactly the areas that you service. So again, if you're in Tulsa, Oklahoma, like, yeah, you're in Tulsa, but you're also serving Broken Arrow. Trying to think of some other ones. I was looking at this recently.
You know Oklahoma very well.
Yeah, I was just looking at this a couple of days ago. Broken Arrow. Anyways, there's like probably 4 or 5 other like suburbs that are all within 30 minutes that all have good search volume. So I'm going to build pages for every single one of those as well. And then I think it's the playbook is standard, right? You write good content on that. You try to provide value. And again, we're not writing content just like spinning it up and trying to make it like, keyword stuff or anything like that. We're trying to basically like answer questions, make sure that we're preemptively showing them like what we do, what services we offer, that we're, a good fit for them because we're in these different types of areas, using reviews, whatever you got to do, user generated content to fill those pages out. And then it's kind of the classic: build links, build citations, build more content around that space. If you're, again, an HVAC guy, maybe you're writing content around, various repairs, or, when you hear this sound or when this type of thing happens, here's kind of a checklist to see, can you fix it yourself? And then, no, okay, well, you can call this number, kind of thing. So, so that's basically, I don't think that's the thing. I don't think SEO has changed that much since the outset, right? Is you write good content, you build links. And I think the higher quality you can do of both of those things, the more longevity you're going to have. And that to me is always the balancing act where, yeah, we'd all love really, really, really high quality links from, the best sites out there that are the most relevant, et cetera. And it's like, okay, like, what types of links are you willing to build? Like, how far down? We tend to err on the side of caution in terms of anchor text and just the quality of links. We don't do a ton of low quality link building. It's just not something we're interested in doing anymore. And we try to explain to our clients, like, look, like this, like we've been here, we've been doing this for 10 years. We've seen where this trend's going, and the trend is going more and more and more to, content and, quality content and, quality links and relevant links. And like, every year that just becomes a little bit more true. And as I said at the outset, like, that's not to say that different types of link buildings don't work, or, and oftentimes it can be frustrating for clients because I point out, I'm like, look, we're getting outranked by them because they have, 40 PBN links with exact match anchor text, but like their day will come, because my day's come before. Like I've done this before. So it's like, it's just kind of a matter of time. So that's kind of, as I said, in a nutshell, that's basically our project plan. Obviously there's a lot of nuance in there, but that's kind of like, if I was saying, what are we doing that we think works really well? That's kind of the answer.
There's obviously a lot of value for an agency owner to hear that, but I just want to draw the dichotomy maybe for a website builder to what you said. And as an agency owner, I feel like I can kind of touch on this, but as an agency, you have to simplify what you're doing in order to be able to do it repetitively for clients and know that it's going to work consistently, right? And a lot of website owners will, when I interview website owners and I ask a question like that, they'll get into some really nitty gritty tactics. Whereas when I ask an agency owner, more often than not, I get, hey, it's not rocket science. And I think that there's something to learn there. If you are the type of person who really tends to get in the weeds as the secret sauce to growing something, and learning from someone like you or other people who've had to find ways to get results consistently over and over again as an agency for clients, and so sometimes simpler is better. Sometimes it's not, for the record. Sometimes there's a need. You're in a highly competitive niche. You have to go all the way to beat out that competitor, but sometimes people overcomplicate it. And so it's a really good message to hear from you. Like, hey, the playbook for clients paying a lot of money is pretty simple.
Yeah, no. And to be fair, I think affiliate SEO tends to be more challenging than client SEO. So I just kind of want to throw that out there, right? So I understand that sometimes there's, their line may shift in different directions in terms of what, they're willing to do in terms of link building or whatever it might be. But I think, as I said, I think I just generally believe if I was to go build a site again, which I think about all the time because it was like the first thing I ever did. And I was like, I would, that would be what I would do. As I would try to find something that I'm relatively like, that I find enjoyable to a degree. Like I said, it doesn't have to be like, it doesn't have to be like my favorite, like hobby, like, or like, my passion, but that's kind of like, find something that is relatively low comp and then, build good content, do the outreach thing. And as I said, I don't think it's changed that much. There's another, I'll get it to you after. I can't remember his name either, but there's a guy I follow on Twitter as well, he's got 3 sites. One's about beer, one's about coffee, one's about pools, spas. And he's crushed it. He's been around, he's had these sites for 10 plus years. I don't think he's ever built a link, but he's like,
we had him on, Matt.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. He's like I said, I follow him because I think he's really, really interesting.
He was on the podcast a couple months ago, I think.
And great. And like, he's like I said, those 3 sites are incredibly, like, if I was looking at kind of starting again, I'd like, okay, this is like a, like, I think I remember looking at his beer one and he had like built like a full on like tap room in his garage. And I was like, okay, like no one's ever going to outrank that. Like this guy literally like built this with his hands and like shot all the pictures and everything. And of course that's like to the extreme, but I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's incredible.
That's a fun reference. That's a fun reference. We had a great interview with him a couple months ago.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, this has been great. Where can people follow along with what you've got going? You've got an agency, and that is Saltwater Digital, and that's saltwaterdigital.com. Where can people follow along with what you have going? I'd love to hear your Twitter handle for starters.
Yeah, so it's at Dan the Wolf. So Wolf is WOLFE. So that's my Twitter handle, and then saltwaterdigital.com. And I'm starting to put up more content on that as well, as I try to lean into that a little bit. As I said, I just try to, trying to get more case studies up, things like that. So that's another area. You can definitely check me out there. But yeah, those are kind of the 2 areas. I don't divest much of my attention elsewhere. So
maybe we'll catch up with you on LinkedIn someday if you get around to
that's
to
right.
doing that. Yeah,
exactly.
Only so much time though, right? Only so much time.
There's only so much time in the day. That's right.
Hey, well, thanks, Dan. Really appreciate you coming on board, and all the best in your agency going forward.
Appreciate it, Jared.
Yep. Talk soon.
Take care. Goodbye.